Hi, welcome back to the channel. If you're a regular viewer of my videos, you'll know that I post interesting stories about the world of business, finance and investment. But business can be quite boring. So I try to make those videos as fun as possible. And in each one, I like to include an interesting and fun story at the end that'll put a smile on your face. And this video is a compilation of some of the funniest videos that I've posted recently. So hopefully you'll enjoy it. If you do, please give me a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already. And finally today, I wanted to talk about marketing. Now, marketing is obviously a really important part of anybody's business, and particularly so if you're high profile, if you've got a brand or a name that everybody is familiar with. And Gwyneth Paltrow falls into that bracket. So Gwyneth Paltrow has been a massive star in Hollywood for a long period of time. She stars in the Marvel movies, she's Tony Stark's right-hand woman, but she's been in lots of blockbuster movies. But that wasn't enough for Gwyneth Paltrow. She wanted to create her own brand and market her own business. And in 2008, she made her first steps in doing that when she created a newsletter and started talking about diet and health and lifestyle. And a turning point in her business came when she had a chat with Peter Arnold, who's a marketing executive, and he joked to her that all internet companies had to have double O in their name. So she took her initials, GP, squeezed a couple of O's in the middle and created her brand GOOP. And GOOP has been expanding and growing over the last 10 years or so. It started life focusing on diet and health and recipes and cookbooks, but has since expanded into fashion and skincare and beauty and lifestyle products. And it's those lifestyle products that I wanted to focus in on today, and particularly candles. So if you want to sell a candle for a huge amount of money, what's the best strategy? How do you convince people to pay $75 for a candle? That is an extortionate amount of money. When you look into what it costs to make a candle, it's relatively cheap. So this is a high margin product. And a lot of firms are selling candles for $20, $30, $40, which is still pretty expensive. But if you want to sell a candle for $75, you need to put something unique into that candle. You need to come up with some form of marketing that makes this extra special and that people want to talk about it and buy it. And Gwyneth Paltrow has managed to do that by coming up with outrageous names for her outrageously expensive candles. And she's just launched her very latest version. Now, you may have heard of this before. You may be familiar with Gwyneth's candle concepts, but I wanted to talk you through the 5 most outrageous candle names and most outrageously priced candles that Goop sell. So at number 5, we've got a candle that doesn't really have that much of an outrageous name. It's called Slightly Bitter. And the concept around this branding is that it relates to relationships. And as you'll know, famously, Gwyneth Paltrow went through a decoupling exercise with Chris Martin, the musician from Coldplay. And Slightly Bitter, I think, relates to this whole relationship thing. But $85 for this candle does look quite expensive. Number 4 on the list is This Smells Like My Prenup, which doesn't make any sense at all because a prenup doesn't have any smell. But the branding and the marketing around this is genius because Gwyneth Paltrow has managed to link a candle to a prenup, as if this is something to do with getting married and having a prenup and all the things relating to that. And again, the price of this has come in at $75. Number 3 on the list is This Smells Like My Orgasm. Now, I don't know what this candle smells like. I haven't got one. I've never smelt it. But even if I had one, I'm not entirely sure what I would expect this to smell like. And also, I don't know whether this relates to my orgasm or Gwyneth Paltrow's orgasm. It's not quite clear. It doesn't say in the small print. But either way, it's a genius piece of marketing and it's retailing for $75. Number 2 on the list is the brand new product that's just been launched, which is called Hands Off My Vagina. Now, I'm not sure what Hands Off My Vagina is meant to smell like. It isn't really a smell, is it? It's just a statement. And to be fair to Gwyneth Paltrow, there is some form of link to charity here. This candle has been directly related to a lot of news about abortion that's been in the press. So again, another brilliant piece of marketing by Gwyneth Paltrow and her firm GOOP, because they've got this candle into the press and on the front pages of a lot of publications. And it's retailing for $75. And number one on the list is the single most famous candle in the world. This smells like my vagina. Again, I don't own one of these candles. I don't know what it smells like. And again, I don't know whether it's meant to smell like my vagina or Gwyneth Paltrow's vagina. It's not stipulated. But as it's retailing at $75, I won't be finding out anytime soon. This is not something that I've got on my birthday or Christmas present list for this year. And finally today, an embarrassing story from the second largest energy provider in the UK. This is a company called OVO Energy, and it decided to send out some advice to its customers on how to keep warm during the winter without turning the thermostat up. So this was meant to be useful advice to all the customers as to what they could be doing to save some money this winter. But it seems that the person who wrote the blog that was sent to 5 million customers was either having a bad day or just had a very twisted sense of humour. So the 10-point plan included eating oatmeal or porridge, wearing an extra jumper, cleaning the house, having a cuddle with your pets or a loved one, doing a few star jumps, and challenging your kids to a hula hoop competition. The reaction to this in the UK has been pretty negative. There's a lot of older customers who are saying that they're unable to do star jumps and that their children are now too old to challenge to a hula hoop competition, and they don't have any pets because they've all died. The chief executive of OVO has come out and apologised to all the customers and said that somebody just had a bad day when they wrote that blog. So I'm not entirely sure who wrote this blog and why it was done, but it put a smile on my face and I thought I'd share the news with everybody on the channel. And finally today, I'll finish up with a story about KFC. The KFC has almost 6,000 restaurants in China. So it's a really big fast food operator. Like all fast food operators, it decided to run a promotion to support some of its kids' meals. Now this is something we're very familiar with. We see McDonald's and Burger King doing these sort of things all the time. So KFC teamed up with a Chinese manufacturer called Pop Mart, who makes Dimu dolls. Now I'll show you some images of Dimu dolls, and they're very popular in China. And one of the reasons that they're so popular is that they sell mystery boxes. So you buy a Dimu doll, but you don't know what you're buying. It's a surprise when you open it. So KFC thought that this would be a great idea. They would include these mystery boxes as part of their meal deals. And this proved to be a roaring success with consumers. And actually, people started going crazy over this concept. In fact, they started going so crazy that there were queues forming outside of KFCs and people were buying massive amounts of these meal deals. It was reported that one customer purchased 106 meal deals for a total cost of $1,649. Everybody became obsessed with the toys and nobody was interested in the food. So a lot of people were buying these meal deals and then dumping the food. Now the store managers started limiting the amount of meal deals that people were able to buy. And there were stories of consumers waiting outside stores and paying people to go in and buy more meal deals for them so they could get more of these Dimu dolls. So it was a complete craze, which you would think would be good news for KFC and they'd be quite happy with the extra promotion. However, unfortunately for KFC, last year, the Chinese authorities decided to crack down on food wastage. And they identified the fast food operators as retailers who were promoting waste and encouraging people to buy more food than they needed. So you can imagine what the reaction has been. And the China Consumers Association has come out and now asked for everybody in China to boycott KFC. So what was meant to be a celebratory promotion recognising KFC's 35-year history in China and what they thought was going to be a hugely successful campaign has now actually backfired, and they've now got everybody boycotting the KFC stores in China. So a complete disaster for all of these marketeers. They came up with what they thought was a great concept. It was unfortunately far too successful. Everybody went insane over the Dimu dolls, and now they've been left with potentially a black hole in their sales for the next few weeks. So I thought that was worth mentioning because in business, sometimes you can be too successful for your own good. And finally today, I wanted to talk about wages. Inflation is at an all-time high in a lot of markets, and wage increases are generally not moving at a fast enough rate to compete with the cost of living. So overall, we're all starting to be worse off on a monthly basis. We've all got a bit less cash in our pockets than we would like. And I wanted you to spare a thought for the poor guys on Wall Street. The Citibank CFO has come out recently and said there's been a lot of pressure on wages and they're aware that they need to keep looking after their staff. And so they've just increased the base salary for all of their junior bankers to $110,000. And second-year bankers have had their pay increased to $125,000. But don't worry, before I finish on this topic, that isn't the end of the remuneration for those guys. They are entitled to a bonus on top of that. So thankfully, these guys should be okay. I think that will see them through the problems with rising inflation, certainly for this year. But the good news doesn't stop there, because JP Morgan have just announced that they've increased the total amount of their bonus pool by 40%. And even better than that, Goldman Sachs have announced that they've increased their bonus pool by 50% and that they're going to make a special one-off payment to all 400 of their executives over and above their salary and their bonus. So some really good news from Wall Street to finish off with. All the bankers are getting paid even more than they were last year, so we don't have to worry about where they're going to find the money this year for their brand new Lamborghinis. And finally today, I wanted to finish on a story that might put a smile on your face. There aren't many companies who have benefited from COVID and lockdowns and everything that's been going on in the world over the last couple of years. But one business that has done fantastically well is Crocs. And Crocs, if you're not familiar with the brand, are the guys who make rubber clogs. So these are very comfortable, soft loungewear. Sometimes you see them on the beach, but they're very casual. And they tend to be a bit of a black and white situation. You either love them or you hate them. A lot of people can't stand Crocs, but there's a huge section of society who absolutely love them. And the pandemic has been absolutely fantastic for Crocs because people can wear these things the whole time. They don't have to go out. There's no embarrassment factor. Sales rocketed 67% in 2021, and the share price has increased over 400% over the last 3 years, giving the company a valuation of over $7 billion. So this is absolutely massive. So love it or hate it, Crocs is a massive success story. And it's just announced recently that it's buying another business that's in the same space called Hey Dude for $2.5 billion. Now, if you don't know Hey Dude, they are also very comfortable shoes, but slightly more socially acceptable than Crocs. So it's nice to hear that somebody has done well from the pandemic and that these guys are continuing to grow. So it's not a stock that I'm following, but maybe it's one that you want to have a look at, put a smile on your face and possibly even invest into. And finally today, I'll finish off with a story about the Pope. So the Pope was caught on camera this week making a late night visit to a record shop. And apparently he's a big music fan and he misses the fact that he used to be able to go out and about in Buenos Aires when he was back at home before he became the Pope. And he really wanted to go and see this new record shop that had been refurbished. So he popped in to pick up a few CDs, but unfortunately somebody caught him on their camera phone and posted the video worldwide. So we've got some images of the Pope leaving a record store with a CD in his hand. And the question that I had for everybody was, what do you think that CD was? So I've got a few suggestions, but I'll be interested to hear from you in the comments as to what you think. So my top three that I've come up with are Heaven is a Place on Earth by Belinda Carlisle, Knocking on Heaven's Door by Eric Clapton, or Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin. But please let me know what you think the Pope was buying on Tuesday night this week. And finally today, BMW have announced that it is developing a colour-changing car. So BMW have been using electronic ink technology that's normally used on digital tablets and readers, so things like a Kindle. And at the moment, they can only switch the colour between white and grey. So it's similar to the screen that you would see on a Kindle. But in the future, they're hoping to be able to develop this into the full spectrum of colours. And this would be a car that you could change the colour of on an app. So you'd have your app on your phone or a button in the car. And depending on your mood and what's happening and how you want to be seen by all the people, you could just change the colour of your car as you're driving down the road. So this is real space age technology, futuristic stuff, but I think is a really interesting development. And would be welcomed, and the first manufacturer that can get this to market is going to have a real first mover advantage. Now, it wouldn't surprise me if Elon Musk is talking to BMW or his developers to try to beat these guys and get this onto one of the Tesla models, because he's usually first to market, and I'm sure he will have read this with interest and he's not already onto it himself. And finally today, I wanted to tell you about the chairman of the Swiss banking corporation Credit Suisse, a guy called Antonio Horta Osorio. Now, this gentleman was previously the chief executive of Lloyds Bank in the UK for 9 years, and very high profile individual, and earned a lot of money whilst he was in that role, over $75 million. And Credit Suisse has had some scandals and problems over the last few years, and it brought in Horta Osorio to try to sort them out. So the bank had had a number of financial scandals. They'd invested a lot of clients' money into 2 funds, both of which collapsed and went bankrupt, and they lost billions on behalf of their clients. And alongside that, they also provided a $1.3 billion loan to Mozambique that was referred to as a tuna bond to help develop the tuna fishing industry in Mozambique. But it turned out that a lot of that money was used illegally on gunships and other activities, and that over 200 million had been used for kickbacks, including 50 million to Credit Suisse bankers themselves. And in addition to all of that, the bank was also found guilty of spying on its own staff. A guy who was a former star wealth manager had decided to leave the bank to go to UBS, the other Swiss banking giant. And he found himself being followed one day in Zurich by a guy, and he confronted him, and it turned out he was a private investigator who'd been hired by Credit Suisse to follow him and his wife to see what they were up to. And as that scandal broke, it turned out that Credit Suisse had hired a number of private investigators to follow a lot of senior executives in the bank. So Credit Suisse decided they needed to bring somebody in to sort out all of these messes and to put the bank back where it belongs in the highly regarded world of Swiss banking. But unfortunately, Mr. Horta Osorio has now had to resign himself due to a number of errors of judgment. It turns out that whilst the COVID restrictions were being imposed in the UK, he decided to fly into the country to watch the Wimbledon tennis finals and ignore all of the quarantine and isolation rules that were in place at that time. In addition to that, he then flew into Switzerland on the 28th of November at a time when the Swiss had imposed a mandatory 10-day quarantine for anybody arriving in the country, and he then flew out again 3 days later. An investigation was started within the bank, but Mr. Horta Osorio has now resigned from his position of chairman, where he was being paid over $5 million per year. Now, this isn't the first time that he's been in a slightly awkward position. Back in 2016, when he was chief executive of Lloyds Bank, he was accused of having an affair whilst on a business trip to Singapore by a national newspaper who published photographs of him. And in response to that, he sent an apology email to all 75,000 staff at Lloyds Bank, apologising for his actions. So this story's put a smile on my face for a couple of reasons. Firstly, there are some people in this world who have so much money and believe that they are so important that they can go over and above the law and do things that nobody else is allowed to do. And this story shows you that they can't get away with it, that actually you have to abide by the rules, and nobody cares how much money you've got and what your title is. If you've broken the rules, you're going to have to pay the price for it. And secondly, once an idiot, always an idiot. If you're caught out in a highly embarrassing situation by a national newspaper, and that leads to you having to send an apology to 75,000 people, then you would make sure that for the rest of your life, you did everything by the book and didn't get yourself back into a position where you're going to be exposed to the international press as being a repeat idiot. And it beggars belief that somebody would be so stupid to go out and do something like this, not once, but twice, and possibly even more times that we don't know about, and then get himself splashed across the international press and all over the internet as being a grade A idiot. And finally today, I wanted to tell you the story of a 19-year-old college dropout who's just been announced as one of the latest fintech billionaires. Guillaume Poussaz is a Swiss national who initially studied university in Sweden, but his father became ill with cancer and he decided to drop out of college. Life was too short, and he moved to California to learn how to surf. Now, Guillaume didn't have a lot of money, and eventually he had to take a job, and he ended up working for a company by chance called Payment International Consultants, and these guys were involved in international payments. So as with a lot of people, he ended up staying in that industry and learning more about it, and in 2012 he decided to start a new venture himself called Checkout.com, which was an online payments business focused on retail businesses. Now, the startup has been quite successful and has landed some big name customers, including Netflix, Coinbase, and Pizza Hut. And as with most of these startups, it's loss-making and needs to continually raise money to keep feeding its own growth. And the business has just completed its latest fundraise, which values the company at $40 billion. They raised $1 billion from a variety of US investors, and that values Guillaume's shareholding in the business at over $20 billion. So I wanted to mention this as I like Guillaume's story. His father was taken seriously ill and he decided to go and live his dream. However, the reality of life kicked in, and out of money, he found himself working for a payments processing business. But as with a lot of successful entrepreneurs and individuals, that wasn't good enough for him. He didn't want to just do a 9-to-5 existence. He was ambitious and entrepreneurial, so he learnt the systems, he learnt the business, and then decided he could do it better. So he started his own business in 2012, and less than 10 years later, he is a multi-billionaire. So I think this is great inspiration for anybody. It's never too late, and you can do things, you can start things that can go on to be worth a lot of money and can lead you to a happy and successful life. So it's a story that I liked and I wanted to share it. I think it's quite heartwarming. Somebody who was initially classified as a dropout is now being seen as a fintech legend.